Welcome to Iraqi Dinar News, where you receive real and authentic updates about the Iraqi dinar. If you want to stay informed with moment-by-moment developments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video. Your support helps us continue providing balanced research-based analysis of Iraq's economy, banking reforms, and developments that may influence the Iraqi dinar. Now, let's examine today's discussion carefully and separate speculation from the economic realities that continue to shape Iraq's financial future. One of the most common questions among Iraqi dinar followers today is whether significant monetary developments could occur before the end of July, or whether expectations should shift toward August or beyond. The statement we are analyzing today presents a cautious personal opinion rather than a confirmed announcement. It suggests that the speaker does not personally expect major progress during July, while acknowledging that unexpected developments are always possible. More importantly, the statement emphasizes that several important check boxes still need to be completed before larger financial changes could realistically occur. This is an important distinction, because responsible financial analysis begins by recognizing the difference between official policy announcements and personal expectations. Financial markets, central banks, and governments operate according to formal decisions, legal procedures, and institutional approvals, not personal forecasts. Therefore, while opinions can help investors understand different viewpoints, they should never be interpreted as confirmation that a specific event will or will not happen on a certain date. When we examine Iraq's economic environment, it becomes clear why many analysts continue to stress patience rather than certainty. Iraq has been undergoing one of the most comprehensive banking modernization efforts in decades. These reforms involve strengthening financial institutions, improving payment systems, increasing transparency, enhancing anti-money laundering compliance, expanding digital banking, and encouraging greater confidence in the domestic banking sector. Each of these reforms represents an individual milestone, but together, they form part of a much larger economic transformation. Large-scale financial reforms are rarely completed overnight. Instead, they progress through multiple phases involving government ministries, the Central Bank of Iraq, Parliament, commercial banks, international financial institutions, and private sector participants. This explains why many observers refer to checkboxes. Those checkboxes are not mysterious events. Rather, they generally represent administrative, regulatory, legal, technical, and operational requirements that must be completed before policymakers are comfortable moving forward with additional reforms. For Iraqi dinar followers, understanding this process is much more valuable than focusing exclusively on calendar dates. Economic reforms do not become successful simply because a particular month arrives. They become successful when the underlying financial system is sufficiently prepared to support long-term stability. That distinction is extremely important. Suppose policymakers were to introduce significant monetary reforms before banking infrastructure, payment systems, compliance standards, and fiscal coordination were adequately prepared. Such an approach could create unnecessary volatility, reduce confidence, and potentially undermine years of reform efforts. Instead, governments generally prefer gradual implementation accompanied by institutional readiness. That is why experienced economists often say that preparation matters more than speed. The statement also includes another important phrase: anything is possible. This reflects an important reality within financial markets. Unexpected developments can occur. Political agreements can be reached faster than anticipated. Legislation can move quickly. International negotiations can conclude earlier than expected. Economic data can improve more rapidly than forecast. Central banks can adjust policy when circumstances change. Therefore, while cautious expectations may point toward August or later, responsible analysis also recognizes that financial developments remain dependent on real-world decisions rather than predetermined schedules. At the same time, it is equally important not to assume that every delay represents a negative development. Large institutional reforms often experience normal administrative timelines. Documents require approval. Regulations require implementation. Technology systems require testing. Commercial banks require integration. Government agencies require coordination. International partners review compliance measures. Each step consumes time, but each completed step can strengthen the long-term credibility of Iraq's financial system. For Iraqi Dinar followers, this perspective encourages patience rather than frustration. Many discussions within the Dinar community focus almost entirely on timing. Questions frequently center around whether something will happen this week, this month, or before a particular holiday. However, economic fundamentals rarely conform to public speculation. Central banks generally avoid making policy decisions simply because market participants expect them by a certain date. Instead, they prioritize inflation management, financial stability, reserve adequacy, banking sector health, and macroeconomic sustainability. These priorities remain significantly more important than meeting speculative timelines. Another aspect worth discussing is the relationship between banking reforms and investor confidence. Confidence is one of the most valuable assets within any financial system. Individuals deposit money into banks because they trust those institutions. Businesses make investments because they trust legal protections. Foreign companies enter markets because they trust regulatory stability. International financial institutions cooperate because they trust governance standards. Without confidence, even substantial financial resources cannot achieve their full economic potential. Over the past several years, Iraq has made continued efforts to improve financial governance. Modern electronic payment systems have expanded. Digital banking services have become more common. Electronic salary distribution has increased. Financial inclusion initiatives continue developing. International banking relationships have gradually strengthened. Although challenges remain, these developments demonstrate that reform is occurring through measurable institutional improvements rather than isolated announcements. This broader context helps explain why analysts frequently mention outstanding requirements before expecting additional monetary developments. Rather than viewing those requirements as obstacles, they can also be viewed as safeguards designed to support long-term economic credibility. The Iraqi economy itself continues evolving beyond its historical dependence on oil revenues. Although petroleum exports remain the country's primary source of government income, policymakers increasingly discuss economic diversification, investment in infrastructure, transportation, agriculture, manufacturing, technology, tourism, and private enterprise has become part of Iraq's broader economic conversation. A more diversified economy generally contributes to greater currency stability over time, because national income becomes less dependent on a single commodity. That transition, however, requires years rather than weeks. It requires legal reforms, private sector expansion, improved investment climates, reliable electricity, efficient logistics, skilled labor, competitive financial institutions. These structural developments cannot be accelerated simply by public expectations. They require sustained implementation. For followers of the Iraqi Dinar, understanding these long-term objectives provides valuable perspective. Rather than viewing every month as a make-or-break deadline, it may be more productive to monitor measurable indicators. These include banking reforms, foreign investment announcements, budget implementation, economic growth data, inflation trends, government revenues, fiscal discipline, financial sector modernization, international partnerships. Each of these factors contributes to Iraq's overall economic trajectory. Short-term market sentiment may fluctuate based on rumors or commentary, but long-term monetary credibility depends upon economic fundamentals. The statement also contains a personal appeal. Don't get mad at me. Don't shoot the messenger. This reflects an issue that frequently appears within highly speculative investment communities. People often become emotionally attached to predicted timelines. When those timelines pass without expected developments, disappointment can lead to frustration. However, responsible financial analysis should remain independent of emotional reactions. Facts change, economic conditions evolve, government priorities shift, global markets fluctuate. Professional analysts regularly update their expectations based upon new information. Doing so represents responsible analysis, not inconsistency. Changing forecasts in response to changing evidence is a normal characteristic of financial research. Another important consideration involves Iraq's relationship with international financial organizations. Although Iraq continues strengthening cooperation with international institutions, domestic policy decisions remains subject to Iraq's own legal framework and sovereign decision-making process. External organizations may provide technical guidance, recommendations, financing support, or regulatory assistance. However, implementation ultimately depends upon Iraqi authorities. Therefore, whenever observers mention pending checkboxes, those requirements may involve coordination among multiple institutions rather than a single decision-maker. Such coordination naturally requires time. In the short term, if additional administrative work continues into August, markets may simply interpret this as part of the ongoing reform process. That does not automatically imply negative economic conditions. Likewise, if progress occurs sooner than expected, markets will evaluate official announcements according to their substance rather than speculation. Either scenario emphasizes the importance of relying upon verified information. For Iraqi citizens, continued banking reform may offer practical benefits regardless of currency speculation. Improved payment systems can reduce transaction costs. Greater banking access can encourage savings. Modern financial services can improve business efficiency. Expanded electronic payments may reduce dependence on physical cash. Enhanced compliance standards may strengthen international financial relationships. These practical improvements often receive less attention than exchange rate discussions, yet they may have equally significant long-term economic value. Businesses also benefit from predictable financial systems. Reliable banking services facilitate investment planning. Credit availability supports entrepreneurship. Efficient payment infrastructure improves commercial activity. Greater transparency attracts international business partners. These developments collectively contribute to broader economic growth. Economic growth itself influences government revenues, employment opportunities, consumer spending, and private sector expansion. While exchange rate discussions often dominate headlines, these underlying economic improvements provide much of the foundation supporting long-term monetary stability. International investors also monitor governance indicators. Stable regulatory environments generally encourage capital inflows. Clear legal frameworks reduce uncertainty. Predictable fiscal policies improve confidence. Strengthened banking supervision enhances credibility. As Iraq continues improving these institutional areas, investor perception may gradually evolve. Again, these are long-term processes rather than overnight transformations. Another factor deserving attention is fiscal management. Government budgeting plays an important role in maintaining macroeconomic stability. Effective public spending, revenue management, debt withdrawal investment, debt sustainability, public sector efficiency, all influence the country's overall economic outlook. Successful implementation of fiscal policy can reinforce confidence among domestic businesses, international investors, and financial institutions alike. The Central Bank of Iraq likewise continues balancing multiple objectives, supporting monetary stability, managing inflation, maintaining reserve adequacy, strengthening financial sector resilience, supporting payment modernization, encouraging confidence within the banking system. These objectives often require careful coordination with broader government economic policy. That coordination further illustrates why major financial developments frequently depend upon multiple institutional milestones, rather than isolated announcements. Looking ahead, observers will likely continue monitoring official statements from Iraqi authorities, rather than relying exclusively on commentary from individual analysts. Official publications provide the most reliable basis for evaluating policy developments. Although opinions can stimulate discussion, confirmed government decisions remain the primary source of actionable information. This disciplined approach helps reduce unnecessary speculation while promoting informed understanding. It is also worth remembering that currency values reflect broader economic performance over extended periods. Productivity, trade, investment, fiscal management, monetary policy, political stability, institutional credibility, all interact to influence long-term currency strength. No single event determines the future of an economy. Instead, progress usually results from consistent improvement across multiple sectors. That broader perspective is particularly useful whenever discussions become focused on individual dates or months. Whether developments occur in late July, August, or another period, the more meaningful question concerns the quality and sustainability of those developments. A well-prepared reform, supported by strong institutions, is generally more durable than a rushed policy introduced before necessary preparations have been completed. Therefore, patience can sometimes become an important component of responsible economic observation. The statement we analyze today ultimately encourages measured expectations. It neither guarantees delay nor promises immediate action. Instead, it reflects one individual's assessment that several important requirements may still need completion before larger developments occur. That viewpoint should be understood as analysis rather than confirmation. For Iraqi Dinar followers, the most constructive approach remains monitoring verified information, evaluating official announcements carefully, and considering both short-term developments and long-term structural reforms together. Short-term headlines may continue generating speculation regarding timelines, but the underlying economic story remains centered on institutional modernization, banking reform, fiscal coordination, financial transparency, and sustainable economic growth. If those reforms continue advancing successfully, they may strengthen Iraq's overall financial position over time. The pace of progress will depend upon practical implementation, effective governance, and continued cooperation among Iraq's financial institutions. As always, patience, careful research, and reliance on official information remain essential when following developments related to the Iraqi economy and the Iraqi dinar. Markets reward informed decision-making far more consistently than emotional reactions to rumors or speculative deadlines. Thank you for watching today's Iraqi dinar analysis. If you appreciate responsible, factual, and balanced coverage of Iraq's economy, banking reforms, and Iraqi dinar developments, make sure to subscribe to the channel and like the video so you never miss future updates. We will continue bringing you verified information, thoughtful economic analysis, and objective discussions as new official developments emerge. Finally, please remember that this content is provided for informational and educational purposes only. It should not be considered financial, investment, or legal advice, and viewers should always conduct their own research and consult qualified financial professionals before making any investment decisions.